suppose we got her. Yeah, it was nice to see. All right. I'll call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for November 6, 2024. Roll call, please.
Arel. Here. Budke. Here. Kleva. Kuhn. Here. Lunsky. Mattson.
Here.
Reichert.
Here.
Sandy. Here. Wasvik.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, reading and approval of the minutes from October 2nd, 2024 meeting. Mr. Reichert?
Move approval.
Moved by Mr. Reichert, second by Ms. Sandy. Any further discussion? Not seeing any hands. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Meetings are approved as submitted. 3, public hearings, final approvals, petitions, and minor changes.
3-1 replat of Airport 7-3 subdivision located at 1215 North 42nd Street with street and highway ordinance dedication.
Ms. Grasser.
Good evening. So this is the final time you'll be seeing this plat. Grand Forks Public Schools has brought this forward to straighten out Career Drive, making the intersection more of a 90-degree standard intersection. It'll be safer for getting on and off North 42nd Street. They'll be reestablishing right-of-way, the 10-foot utility on the northern side here, and the utility easement along that lot line just to the north here. The straightening this out will make the northern lot just a smidge bigger, but it is mostly utility easements on that lot, so they'll be able to work around that. Attached is the ordinance as well, just because of the right-of-way dedication. Again, this is the final time you'll be seeing the plat, so I'll stand for any questions.
All right, Mr. Budke.
Yeah, I would just request recusal on this item, number 3-1 and 3-3. In both cases, my employer is the architect of record.
Okay, Mr. Reichert.
So moved.
All right, a bunch of seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, Mr. Budke, you are recused. Thank you very much. All right, any more questions for Ms. Grasser? I do have a public hearing. With that, I'll open up the public hearing. Anybody in the audience like to step up and address 3-1, please do so at this time. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission. Mr. Reichert.
Move approval.
Moved by Mr. Reichert.
Second.
Second by Ms. Arel. Any further discussion? No hands. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, 3-1 passes. 3-2.
3-2 replat of lots 2 and 3, Block 1, Columbia Park 17th Edition, located at 1970 South Columbia Road.
This is Grasser.
So this is a minor replat being brought forward by Widseth. They are requesting to just separate this section of the building by adding a lot line here for the vacant vinyl taco for a new tenant. The proposed lot line is going through the building at the separation line internally, so that has been reviewed by the Department of Building Safety staff, and they thought it was fine. All the utility easements will remain the same. Those aren't being touched. And again, this is the first and final time you'll see this, and I'll stand for any questions.
All right, any questions? With that, I guess I'll open the public hearing. Anybody in the audience want to step up and address 3-2, do so at this time. Seeing no one, close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission. Mr. Reichert.
Move approval.
Moved by Mr. Reichert, second by Ms. Sandy. Any further discussion? Seeing no hands, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. 3-2 passes. 3-3.
3-3 vacation of right-of-way and easements on lots 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, Block 1, Dink, 2nd re-subdivision, located at 1450 to 1660 South 42nd Street.
Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. So this request consists of 6 different vacations, one for right-of-way, the rest for utility easements on or near the future site of the All True Sports Complex, which is to be located along South 42nd Street, right south of the Alaris Center. The vacations are requested to allow for the development of the complex, which will also involve replat requests coming probably first for preliminary review in December. We're requesting the vacations ahead of the plat just because of the longer noticing period for vacations. And with that plat that's intended to come next month, necessary easements will be reestablished. So I have ordered these vacations A through F, and I'll just go through the exhibits here. So first, vacation A is for the right-of-way for South 43rd Street. This street has not been paved or installed, so just vacating the right-of-way there. After each map is the legal description for each one. So here's the legal description for vacation A. Vacation B is for Lot 7, Block 1 of Dank Second Re-subdivision. It's for 3 10-foot utility easements, one on the north, one on the west, and one on the south side. Again, the legal description on the second page. Vacation C for Lot 8, Block 1, we also have 3 10-foot utility easements on the northwest and south sides. Vacation D on Lot 9, Block 1, 2 10-foot utility easements vacated, one on the north and one on the west side. Vacation E for Lot 10, Block 1 of Dank Second. We have, again, 2 10-foot utility easements, one on the north side, one on the east side. And finally, vacation F on Lot 11, Block 1, we have 3 10-foot utility easements on the north, east, and south sides. Yeah, those are all 6 of the vacations as part of one request. We kind of just consolidated them all since they're all in the same area. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Mr. Akert?
Are there no utilities going to that BMX track on Lot 11, Block 1?
They're all coming from the north.
So we don't need any?
Not at this time, but we will be reestablishing because there's going to be another spine coming through that you'll see next month.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes, just to disclose, I am working as the project executive building the Alter Sports Complex, so may need to be recused on this if you feel that way.
Okay.
No.
You're fine. Yeah, you're fine on this. Okay, with that, I will open the public hearing. Anybody in the audience like to step up and address 3-3, please do so at this time. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission. Mr. Reichert.
Move approval.
Moved by Mr. Reichert. Second. Second by Ms. Sandy. Any further discussion? Seeing no hands, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. 3-3 passes unanimously. Communications and preliminary approvals.
4-1, ordinance to amend City of Grand Forks Chapter 18 Land Development Code, sections relating to R1, R2, R3, R4, and RM setbacks.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. So this is the first of the 2 ordinance changes that I brought as an information item last month, along with my presentation on the variance data collection analysis project that I did. So this specific ordinance change is for side yard setback requirements in R1, R2, R3, R4, and RM zoning districts. So the results of my variance data project found that 43 side yard setback variances were granted over 10 years, starting 2013 to 2023, making it the 3rd most granted variance over that time. One specific thing that I brought up in relation to the side yard setbacks was the 20% rule. So the R1 through R4 and also the RM zoning districts feature the 20% rule, which reads that each lot shall have 2 side yards, one on each side of the principal building. The sum of the widths of the 2 side yards shall not be less than 20% of the average width of the lot. As I said last month, this rule often adds additional side yard setback requirements beyond what is outlined in each zoning district code. Here I have slide 11 pulled up from my presentation last month, which kind of illustrates those additional side yard setback requirements brought on by that rule. This rule can be confusing for property owners and also be considered inconvenient for those with larger lots, as maximum utilization of those lots is not feasible with the rule in place. Additionally, recent PUDs have requested simple 5 or 7-foot side yard setbacks in order to simplify designs and maximize building footprints. So therefore, staff is recommending the removal of the 20% rule for side yard setbacks in the R1, R2, R3, R4, and RM residential zoning districts, and only utilizing the side yard setbacks already prescribed in each zoning district's code. This change will act to simplify and reduce side yard setback requirements in residential districts, allowing for maximum utilization of lots while also still maintaining separation using regulations already outlined in code. So with that, I do have the presentation pulled up. I can kind of go through here if anyone has questions, and I'll stand for any discussion.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Johnson?
I would have a question, and it's more for the two realtors on the commission. I mean, given some of the problems we've had with crowding lots, do you guys see any problem with this? If we do everything in a development? If we do a large development with all these small setbacks?
Please.
Thanks. I'm not a fan of the more dense developments that we've done, and then my concern too is, so if you change this and make it easier, then folks don't have to come for a variance. But is that the case or is that not?
So let me just scroll down. So for an example here, for the R1, for example, if people, depending on how big their lot is, if they meet side yards, are like here, if they have a lot, let's say that it's 100 feet wide, if they meet the 10 on both sides, they would not need to go to board adjustments, no.
So the theory behind changing code too is once you grant a certain number of variances, you've set a precedent. And so you really have no basis to deny a future variance because you've approved so many others before it. So then you really should change code to avoid that variance process. So that's what we were trying to do with the research of how many have we granted, what's the consistency of it, what's the precedence on it. So we're essentially saying you can stretch your house out wider on your lot if you need a one floor or a ranch style or whatever. You can use more of the width of your lot, maybe less than the going back, because our impervious is still in place. We're not changing that, so we're not allowing a building to get actually bigger. We're just saying you can go wider and still have to meet impervious.
Okay, so impervious isn't changing, and then the other part of my question is, do you think then people will just come and ask for a variance to this now because they're being given this,
They certainly always have the option to, because you shouldn't necessarily gatekeep a variance request if there's a true hardship. The hardship then needs to be proven to the Board of Adjustments that there is a significant reason to reduce from this.
And in the past, it has been that you have to prove a hardship,
You
but
should
they're all
provide-
granted. So it seems to me that and I'm okay with this, but I wonder if before this is done, if there should be a different process rather than going to Board of Adjustments for some of these, because you really don't have to show a hardship. It seems to me that almost everything gets a variance, and so if we're gonna change this, then people are gonna just go and ask for more. They're gonna be approved because you don't really have to show a hardship. So I think perhaps the processes are flawed, and maybe that should be looked at before we make a code change.
We can certainly follow up with a review of the Board of Adjustments and do that. My thought from a staff perspective is because so many have been granted, it would be hard to set that precedent now if I put the legal hat on.
Yeah.
But to your point of the process and the hardship, that certainly is a part
So
of it.
I guess I would support this, but I would suggest that City Council look at changing the process for a variance.
Mr.
So that we
Brooks?
don't
Oh,
end up
sorry.
in the same position in 5 years because everybody ended up 2 feet from their side setback. I don't know.
Mr. Brooks?
Yeah, I was going to mention that we did have a conversation with the Board of Adjustments, which is made up of at-large folks. I think there's 5 or 6 that sit on a board. I hadn't thought about, somebody would ask to go down to 2. I guess our fear was that once we have somebody saying, hey, I'll stay within my 7, but then we need a impervious lot coverage amendment. And we stressed with them that we should not be doing that. That was not the intent of this. They understood that, and we kind of look at that impervious lot coverage as we really need to hold that because, you know, if you think about that Vale Circle area, we've had some stormwater issues, and actually Columbia to Washington, 32nd to the north, there's been, you know, street flooding in some areas, and we could have some, depending on some of these larger than normal rain events that we've had. And so we're trying to reduce that and have them hold steady to that. I don't know if they see people going down to 2. Our thought on this one specifically was it's that 20% rule. A house would be at 7 foot on one side, but then they'd be required to be 9 foot on the other. And that just seemed a little odd to us. And usually we're dealing with those with established houses. It would be, hey, can I fit this small addition onto my house? That's typically what I think a lot of those we're dealing with. But anytime somebody's looking to go down underneath that minimum, that should still be held firm. But I think they were definitely granted, although we really couldn't I don't think we looked at this in the numbers as, you know, if it was you needed 16 total, you were at 7 on one side, you know, what were the amount of times that we allowed them to go down to 7 versus down to 2 or something like that. I don't think we ran those numbers, but just to kind of hit, I thought you're going somewhere else with that, but we should never go down to 2 feet. I mean, I can't imagine a scenario.
Right. So they're going to stick more at 7. Let's just use that.
It should stick to that minimum, yes.
Should.
Yeah, and it's a good point that, you know, that
Right.
there is, in the past, I think this whole process that we're looking at was looking at those amount that were given, but we're also looking at, you know, what makes sense, and then what were other communities doing as well, so we're trying to look at all of those things.
Ms. Earl, did you have something?
Yeah, I guess to answer your question, my biggest concern with the smaller lot sizes comes down to parking and snow removal and like the mailboxes. So if we start condensing these neighborhoods and making the lot smaller, it's more the lot size versus the size of the house on the lot. The size of the house on the lot, I think, is probably going to know your neighbor more than anything, because if you buy, you know, a 150-foot lot and you're 10 feet on each side or 7 feet on each side, you know, you buy a bigger lot to have more space and because you don't mind mowing. So I think for me, the smaller lot sizes had more to do with just the movement of snow, mailboxes. You can't park on the streets because there's nowhere to park. That was kind of so.
Okay.
But I don't have a big issue with
It is preliminary, and so we can add in, you know, to take a look at that. I think that's a good idea. Mr. Budke?
I'll just add a thought here. So,
Here, I thought you were going to
you know, we're talking about the side yards specifically, right, and the setbacks, right? So, like, you know, the graphic that you have on the screen now, you know, that red box represents, you know, where's the allowable building area, right? Like the location of the building, no matter what its footprint, could shift within that red box. So I guess, you know, I appreciate that you guys started with, you know, really parsing through the data and seeing where there was like this, like frequently coming back to the same thing over and over again. And then as far as what you're proposing, in my mind, it seems pretty measured, right? When we look at the ordinance, there's sort of like a baseline requirement. You know, I think it was 7 feet in almost every case. And the only part that we're modifying or striking is this like 20% on top of that, which I agree. I think that is confusing. I think if I came across that in the code, I'd have to read it through about 3 or 4 times. So I guess this is all to say I'm in favor of this. I don't think we're really making a really big change with this. Frankly, I think we're just eliminating some confusing language. So
That's you moving approval?
yes.
All right. Just checking. Second by Ms. Earl. Nope, good thoughts. Any further questions? All right, discussions. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. 4-1 passes. 4-2.
All right, so along the same lines as, same with the last one, this is the other ordinance change that I talked about last month. This one is for residential accessory building area allowances. So with the variance data project, it was found that 130 accessory building area variances were granted over that 10-year period, making it the second most granted variance. Upon evaluating other cities' accessory building area regulations, it was found that Bismarck and Fargo actually allowed for higher allowances than Grand Forks. With that, staff is recommending an increase to the accessory building area permitted for properties under 10,000 square feet in area, up from 1,000 square feet to 1,200 square feet, and for properties having lot areas of 10,000 square feet or greater, an increase from 1,200 square feet up to 1,400 square feet. Staff feels that this is reasonable since the increase is incremental and also better reflects the increase in size of some newer residential lots. So again, any questions and discussion? I'll stand for.
Any questions for Ms. Johnson?
Move approval.
Moved by Ms. Sandy. Second by Mr. Mattson. Any further discussion? Seeing no hands, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. 4-2 passes. 4-3.
4-3, plat of Long King Edition located at 2500 to 2600 North Washington Street, with street and highway ordinance dedication.
Ms. Grasser.
So this plat is being brought forward by Prula Engineering on behalf of the owners of Long King. This is also coinciding with the rezone right after. The middle lot line here is being reconfigured to better accommodate the odd shape of the lot and the shape of the English coulee that goes around it. The owner and the surveyor are working with the U.S. Army Corps to fulfill all of their flood control accommodations and to get approval. They're hoping to do that next month, so they have to still nail that down with them. But in terms of working with our engineering department, they'll look at that as soon as the U.S. Marine Corps or Army Corps are signed off. The utility easements will stay in place. They do meet our subdivision regulations, and attached is the ordinance for the dedication of right-of-way. This is preliminary approval. Staff recommends signing off on the preliminary approval. I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Grasser? If you ever seen that lot, they have a lot to do. They've been working on it. I drive by it every day.
Yeah.
Mr. Reichert?
Move approval.
Second by Ms. Sandy. Any further discussion? Seeing no hands, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. 4-4.
4-4, ordinance to amend zoning map rezoning from A1 Agriculture Preservation District to I2 Heavy Industrial for lots 1 and 2, Block 1, Long King Edition, located at 2500 to 2600 North Washington Street.
Ms.
So
Grasser?
going along with that plat, here are the two lots highlighted. They're looking to go from A1 to heavy industrial. That kind of matches their surrounding in purple here. They will maintain their office shop at the buildings. It'll be in 3 phases, but the original building in phase 1 will be their business shop and offices. So that fits within the I2. And then they'll add storage in their phase 2 on top of that. But they'll maintain a entrance off of North Washington and have their shop there. And the notices to neighbors will go out after preliminary approval, and that would be 800 feet around. I'll stand for any questions.
All right, any questions? Mr. Butke?
So with the rezoning, this piece of property, does anybody know, has it ever been in like agricultural production? Or it just
Yeah.
looks like it's vacant at the moment, but,
I think it's always been vacant.
There was always a tractor in there and they were planting. I don't know if they were haying it or what, but
okay.
for years, I drive by there for 25 years.
Right,
so
right.
Got some great.
I got some notice on that one. But yeah, they would park some equipment there, tractors, combines, whatnot, and just looked like they were haying it mostly.
It was probably a tough site because it was so small.
It was,
Yeah.
yeah, a terrible site. They're actually building it up to look pretty decent over there. Okay, Mr. Reichert?
Move approval.
Second by Mr. Mattson. Any further discussion? Not seeing no hands. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, reports from the planning department.
Howdy, folks. My name is Tyler Mansky. I'm with the Forks MPO, and with me today I have Blue Weber and Connor Cox there with Bolton and Mank. I'm here. This is the second time you've seen this study. We came back earlier when we've just started it, but the study started back in May, and it's to look at pedestrian crossings, different things in the Grand Valley area that can increase pedestrian access. So I won't step on Connor and Blue's toes too much, but I would stand for any questions after this, but I'll let Blue Weber take over.
Perfect. Thank you, members of Planning and Zoning. So my name is Blue Weber. I'm with Bolton and Mank. We're a transportation planning and engineering firm here, actually directly across the street. I was not here for our first presentation, but Connor was. So I'm just going to give a little bit of update on some of the things that we've worked on behind the scenes, and then I'll let Connor take it from there and kind of talk about some of the next steps and what we're working on. So with that, Connor, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself before we start running through, but.
Yeah, I can really quickly, and I was at this group a couple of months ago, so you probably remember me, but Connor Cox, a transportation planner with Bolton Mink, and happy to be back here to provide an update on the study.
Yeah, so with that, just to kind of give a brief overview on what we're here to talk about tonight, look at the project overview, kind of talking about why this study came up, why the MPO has kind of been leading this, and some of the work that we've been doing behind the scenes, some of the public engagement that we've done thus far, the project process, and then from there, I'll really let Connor take over and talk about some of the different focus areas, as well as the schedule and next steps. So with that, we'll jump to the next slide. So the project overview really is just here to show you where this area is. And one of the benefits that we have is that this is very much a ton of greenfield area. This is undeveloped, so when we're talking about pedestrian crossings, we have a very great opportunity to start to at least have that conversation with a lot of stakeholders in the area. Oh, are we not connected?
We're not getting it on ours.
Okay. So I'll just kind of explain the project area, though. Really, it's going to be all the way from Columbia up to Washington, 47th, all the way down to Merrifield Road. I'm supposed to be pressing these things. There we go. Connor, you don't have to worry about it. I'll be actually controlling everything.
Perfect.
So as far as the areas on this, like I said, everything from Columbia up to Washington, but also some of Belmont. We really wanted to include that Cherry and 47th area, Cherry and 62nd area, and so we can start to talk about that corridor as well. One of the benefits of this project, like I said, is that there isn't a huge built-in audience. We know that the Grand Valley development itself is already up off the ground, moving really well. There is the Kings Walk neighborhood, but when we're talking about these greenfield areas, it does provide a good opportunity. So two of our partners on this are CPS. This group knows Mike Corman pretty well, and then Mark Schill with Praxis Strategy Group to really help us make sure that we're talking to the right people, having the right conversations. And so some of the steps that we've gone through since the project started was when we kicked off in June, we've had monthly steering committee meetings. This includes members of city staff, as well as John Brodeen from the Realtors Association, as well as some people from the school district and the park district. So really trying to be an all-encompassing steering committee to kind of guide us through the process. We've had a number of different local government presentations, planning and zoning. Obviously, we came here earlier. We're here tonight, but then also going to be sending off our draft report to you at the end of the month so you can start looking at what everything as far as recommendations are. As far as some of the public engagement that we've done, we held these really amazing stakeholder interviews with a couple different people in the area. So one of my favorite ones was Jill from All Seasons. It was great to be able to talk to her as a business that's been in that area for a couple years now. She's seen that area very much develop, so it's been really fun to talk to her, but also talking to people at the school district, Dr. Brenner, as well as Brandon Bombach, and then also talking to some of the local businesses outside of that. So even one of the newer ones that moved out there, talking to Ski and Bike Shop, kind of what their vision are for this area, and make sure that they're part of the process as well. We did a couple pop-ups at the Full Steam Ahead. As we know with pedestrian crossing, we want to make sure that it's usable for all users. So the idea was being at full steam ahead to hand out some surveys, talk to some parents about what they want to see for this area. And so some of the questions that we asked were, what are some of the type of crossings that you would feel comfortable with your children crossing? And also, what are some of the features of pedestrian crossings that you want to see? And then our next thing that we are doing is we're scheduling out some listening sessions with some of those PTOs. And so some people in our office have been working on that with some of the PTOs in that area. From there, I'm going to hand it off to Connor, and I can kind of start to jump into things.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Blue. So just wanted to give a bit of an update on the project process. As you can see in the graphic here, let's see, am I taking over the screen share?
I can control it for you still.
Okay.
We'll just move together.
All right, perfect. So as you can see, we're kind of at the tail end of the study. It's been a very quick process. We kicked this off, I think, in around May or so. So it's really only a 7-month study, pretty expedited timeline. Where we are at in the process right now is we, in our last steering committee meeting, we identified some potential project locations or priority areas within the study area that we want to focus on. And I'm going to talk about those in a little bit here. And now we've been getting into some of the design process. So looking at some different conceptual designs at a few of these different priority locations. And then over the next month and a half here, as we kind of wrap up the study, we're currently working on our project report. And as Blue mentioned, this group will get a chance to review and comment on that report at the end of the month here once we have a draft completed. And we'll be sending that out, which will include a number of different things, which I'll talk about in a little bit here. So go to the next slide. I'm going to move through this pretty quickly. I know we don't have a ton of time, but as I mentioned in our last steering committee meeting, we had a sort of facilitated discussion with the group to try to identify locations that were most important to that group to focus on, kind of focus our energy and attention when it comes to identifying pedestrian safety and mobility improvements. And the first location that I'll talk a little bit about was 62nd Avenue South. The segment that we are focused on is really the section between Washington and then a little bit east of Cherry Street. There's, potential for a lot of development. Obviously, the southern end of the study area, so this is a fast-growing area. And then, as this group probably knows, there's been potential discussions about potentially a new school location along 62nd. So we feel that this is a top priority to really get right when it comes to pedestrian safety and walkability for children. So I'm going to run through a few of the different concepts that we have looked into, and we are currently kind of in the vetting stage right now. I'll mention that we have a steering committee meeting tomorrow morning, so that group hasn't even seen these concepts yet, but we will be kind of discussing all of them, going through different pros and cons of them, and hopefully ultimately coming up with some recommendations at the end of the study for each of the corridors that we're looking at. So I'm going to flip through these quickly, but the first option that we're looking at, this is the option with the narrowest roadway footprint. So that's just a 2-lane roadway, one westbound and one eastbound lane, and then narrow, 4-foot shoulders. So this is essentially about as narrow of a road as you can get. And then we have shared use paths or trails on each side of the road. The next option is similar, except for it adds parking or a wider shoulder on one side of the road. Obviously, if a school does come in and be built in this location, parking on at least one side of the road is going to be really important for school, drop-offs and pickup, as well as for parent drop-offs, not just busing. So that's a key consideration if that does move forward. The next option is looking at basically the same, but having parking on both sides. So as you can see, the footprint of the roadway just grows a little bit as we look into these different options. Next option is a 3-lane configuration. So this maintains the drive lanes in each direction, but adds a center turn lane. So it'd be a 2-way left turn lane. So depending on which way you're turning, north or south, that is an option throughout the entire corridor. And again, this maintains the trail on both sides of the street. And then same thing, just a 3-lane roadway, but with parking on one side is this next option that we explored. And then the last option, 3-lane roadway with parking or shoulders on both sides of the road. So again, there's trade-offs when it comes to all these, but that's something that we're working through with the steering committee. We're going to be hopefully getting some good feedback on all of these tomorrow and come up with some recommendations on how to move forward. I'll also mention that we're just showing you what we call a typical cross-section. It's just basically a slice of what the roadway design could look like. In addition to this, we're developing conceptual layouts. So that's more of a kind of 2D, plan view, top-down view of what that whole corridor would look like. So we're doing both of those. That's a little bit hard to share on a PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to move on to the next priority focus area. This was I would say, kind of the second highest priority from the group from our discussion, and that is looking at South Washington Street, south, basically from 57th Avenue to the south. So as some of you probably know, 57th, it was sort of the extent of a recent reconstruction, and the section to the south of there remains mostly a 2-lane rural roadway. So we're evaluating a number of different design options, including 2 lanes, 3 lanes, or 4 lanes in this section, and I'll walk through those now. Just first to kind of provide some context, this is generally the existing conditions or the built environment that we see along Washington that's a little bit north of the area that we're studying. So this is, one of the things to point out from a pedestrian safety standpoint, which this project is focused on, is this can feel really unsafe and dangerous to cross, mostly because of the width of the crossing. It's about 82 feet wide from curb to curb on both sides. So it creates a long crossing distance, and it also has some challenges with pedestrian visibility when you have that big of a corridor and tends to invite vehicles to speed a little bit. So our main goal for the study is really to enhance pedestrian safety. So looking into a number of different options that we could help with that. So this is just a Google Street View image of existing conditions on Washington and 48th. So it gives you kind of a good perspective of the width that's required for a pedestrian to cross the corridor. And now we'll get into some different options. So the first option looks at a 2-lane divided roadway. So divided essentially just means that we have a median that's running down the middle of the road, and we have parking or shoulders on both sides. Next option looks at a 3-lane roadway configuration. So no shoulder or parking here, but the center turn lane is present throughout the corridor, and then there's trails on both sides on all of these different concepts. And then the last option for Washington Street is a 4-lane divided roadway, which is pretty similar to what is out there today, although this would kind of narrow the footprint a little bit, not quite as wide as the existing roadway. So I spun through this really quickly, but I want to stay true to my time of trying to stick to a 10-minute presentation. So for next steps, as we mentioned, we have 2 more steering committee meetings. One of those is tomorrow, and then we have one in December. Blue and team are meeting with the PTO coming up to share more information about the study and get feedback. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have been developing a draft report for the study, and that'll be completed in late November. And at that time, that'll be shared with this group for any comments or feedback. So that is what I have for you, and we're happy to answer any questions about the study.
I got a question. Couple of them. What's the easement on 62nd right now? Do you know off the top of your head? Whatever it's going to take to build. Yeah.
I don't know what it's,
We haven't platted both sides, at
Should
least
deal with a couple of needed
from Cherry
landowners
over.
on that one.
Typically, locals are 80 foot, I would think. Typically,
It's a county.
house here, but I would say 100 is normally what we'd
Yep.
be grabbing, but I think we only have grabbed the north half, which would have been adjacent to
I might-
Road 7.
Big man circle.
David sent
Uh-oh.
some information today.
Shark in the water.
You have those numbers off the top of your head? No, I don't have that. I know David sent them to me. So,
So just a,
We've got the techie doing it
Yeah.
here.
yeah,
should have had Sierra, should have done it quicker. Because I've become that person.
If I can, I want to point out the part of the question that is not just what's right of way, but what are easements. There's a lot of easements on the south side. I know there's a force main and there's some other city infrastructure that's out there that's basically been put back. I'm sure you've driven by it a number of times a few years ago. There's a lot of work out there. So there is a difference between when you look at the right of way and what is the easement. When the area gets platted, we'll take additional right of way, but we'll also maintain, if not expand, some of those easements because
I just know
the
that's
normal
a tight
city
corridor,
infrastructure will need
which
to go
you
in
know.
there.
That's a tight corridor right now.
Yeah, and some of it's unplatted, so it would go back to there's some of it that's at the statutory 33-foot easement.
Okay. Well, my second question is, have you reached out to any of the residents on there? There's a lot of residents moving in, a lot of young families. And my third would be, why wouldn't you go all the way to Adams Drive? There's more population east of that than there is west of it. So there's a big group of young families moving into this area. So don't stop on Cherry, makes no sense when you've got it all the way to Adams Drive. And, yeah. And I would, you're doing PTOs, you're doing businesses. I don't see a business on this end of 62nd. I would reach out to some homeowners and homeowner groups, and if you need numbers, call me.
I appreciate that.
Blue, I can speak to the extents of what we're looking at. So in terms of what we're actually drawing in our layout, that's between Washington and Cherry, but the idea would be that this cross section would be carried not only east of there, but even potentially west of Washington. So it's just, we've drawn up a corridor that is kind of top priority because of the school area. But again, in the future, it's likely that design would carry both east and west.
There is no school, but there's houses out there already. So there is no school yet, but there's houses out there already. So if we're looking at stuff on an overview, let's look at it all. If we're going to pay this, let's get a study we can use, right?
Yeah, I think area though, it was the street crossings that they were focused on.
Yep.
I think that's why it went Cherry over to Washington.
Right.
They were looking at those crossings, but.
Because you got, Belmont's a big issue for pedestrians and trying to get across in 62nd, and that's why I wanted to go farther than just Cherry. Because Cherry, there isn't much there yet. I know there's a lot of traffic now, but that Belmont concerns me because there is a lot of young kid traffic and a lot of bike riders now.
There's a lot of people who, it's a dog park, like right on the other side of 62nd, you have a lot of people who are crossing.
Not if I have my gun out.
Sorry, I didn't mean it's a dog park in that sense. I just mean that there is a lot of residents who are walking around.
There's been a ton of residential move into this area, and just want to make sure they're getting looked at as well.
Yep.
For walkability, Mr. Budke, I'm with you.
I will say, we've named it, it's named the Grand Valley Study. It's meant for a larger area than just the Grand Valley development. But it was, I got to go out and bike around this area on Friday to kind of take a look at everything that we've been talking so much about. And we the pedestrian infrastructure that's already in that area too. It's encouraging and it's awesome. And so it's neat to be able to point to something and say, hey, we don't even have many houses. There's 5 or 6 houses in there so far. To be able to see that infrastructure already in place, let's make sure that we're keeping this network all connected. So
Yep.
I will be reaching out.
Perfect. Ms. Harrell?
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree with Steve, and I think there needs to be a great way, and I think some of the underpass that they did roughly 55th in Washington, just north of All Seasons this year is amazing. That's sort of my area. Love that you could get across Washington because I like to get to the Greenway from the mid part of town over there. And so, but I do agree with Steve that 55th to Belmont, also south to 62nd is a great area to sort of extend, so.
Mr. Reichert?
Yeah, I would agree. I would echo that. For 30 years ago, when I was in law school here, we were talking about how to get across Washington. I think that is key to be able to get safely across Washington, but also keep traffic moving. I mean, we can't do that. Our town, I think, is a little unique, and we really only have, at this point, 2 major arterials that go north and south. And so we have to get those people across without clogging up Washington or Columbia. And I saw some designs that had 2 lanes on South Washington. I can't imagine how that works. I think to look at that would be a major mistake. I don't see the traffic going down there, but that's your business. You know that better than I do. But I would be very skeptical of anything that doesn't have at least 4 lanes. And then same thing east and west. We only have a couple ways to go east and west. And I had asked I couldn't remember if the intersection was here, but every one of the streets that goes to an interchange on the interstate has at least 4 lanes. I don't know that if 60 seconds going to require that or not, but it's going to have a lot of traffic. And then the other thing that I found interesting was, do you look ever at, you have 10-foot walking paths or biking paths or whatever they happen to be, which I really like because, wider than the sidewalk is much more functional, I think, and much more usable. But have you considered just doing it on one side? Since we're taking so much extra area, have you looked at maybe just doing it on one side instead of both sides? And then maybe you have to have some more crossings, or maybe you have to think about that a little bit more. But I would encourage you to look at that as well.
And Connor, I don't know if you want to respond, but I know that I just have a couple immediate things to kind of respond to. Is one of our surveys questions was design features, crossing features, and wider sidewalks was the second one. Safer crossings was number 1, which is kind of a nebulous concept, but at least it kind of started to say those crossings are the thing that parents wanted to see more than anything, and then wider sidewalks. So I'm with you on that. Connor, I don't know if you wanted to address the one side of the road.
Yeah, I'll just mention that Washington today already has the paths or trails on both sides of the road. So the idea is to make sure that we continue that connection, especially with a road that's that wide. I think if you just had it on one side of the road, essentially you'd introduce or encourage people to cross the street more, which is kind of counter to what we're trying to do. Obviously, we're trying to increase pedestrian safety. On 62nd, that could be something we consider because obviously that's a little bit narrower there. And so that could be an option that we look into and appreciate the feedback on that.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Budke?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. And I had some of the same questions, and I feel like we answered most of them, actually. I guess I just wanted to weigh in on a couple of the comments that have been made. It was mentioned how the priority here is pedestrian safety, right? And we're also trying to balance that with traffic flows and travel times. And I think we should be really cognizant of some of the trade-offs here, right? We've been talking about a school in the context of 62nd, and my mind immediately goes to other schools on sort of call them minor arterials, which I think is what this would be. Where there's a perpetual concern about safety crossing those ways. I'm thinking of 4th and Belmont at Phoenix. I'm thinking of 32nd and Cherry, I guess, right? There's a lot of traffic volume there, and there's a lot of discontent over that road design. And there's been studies about how to improve those, some of which I think are ongoing. So when we're talking about really wide cross sections, I get a little gun shy about that. I think we really need to keep a focus on how long is it taking a person to cross that street, and to what, I guess. If there's is this going to be a major commercial corridor all the way down Washington along 62nd? That doesn't seem especially likely.
And it's one of the reasons why the 62nd and Washington kind of boils up to the top, is because we know the Grand Valley development is happening. There's residential coming in there, there's commercial around that corner, and you see that as kind of the hotbed of area for development right now. So it's the reason why we're having that conversation, is how do you keep traffic flowing while also prioritizing pedestrian safety? And it's kind of making sure that balance is always there.
a couple of the other impressions I had, the slides that you went through, I respond much more positively to the regardless of how wide the right-of-way is, but the road cross-section design that's much narrower and has narrower lanes. And I think Belmont was brought up. That's a great case study. When you're closer to downtown, closer to Phoenix School, it's a relatively narrow roadway, right? There's parking on one side. There's a lot of mature trees very close to the back of the curb. People still find a way to go faster than they should, but they generally keep a lid on the speed. The further south you go, that cross section gets wider. There's less on-street parking. The lanes get wider, and the speeds go up and up and up. People have complained about that, and there doesn't seem to have been any sort of design response to that. And so I think by the time you get down to as far south as this, 62nd, I mean, people are going wide open down there. And it doesn't feel very good crossing, and I hope that whatever design solution we come to here avoids that it's just generally more comfortable to cross the street.
And like Connor said, I mean, one of the challenges that we're facing with a kind of an accelerated timeline, we have a steering committee meeting in about 12 hours right now. And so we're showing off a lot more concepts there and having more conversations with that kind of guiding team. And so it is kind of that, the problem, the conundrum that we're in is that we're bringing you some very kind of like high level, just cross sections, not as much concepts. And so those are things that we'll be very excited for you to look at. And we would love and welcome all that feedback. And so it was kind of the dynamic that we had to deal with, was showing some information, making sure that you guys know that this process is going along, giving us great feedback about you're going to get a call from me and start chatting with some neighbors is what I would love. And so these are the reasons why we wanted to come here. But also
consider this your steering committee.
I'll let Tyler know that.
One last comment quickly. The other thing about the broad cross-section designs that we're seeing there, I mean, there's a trade-off in terms of, pedestrian safety and vehicle traffic speed, but there's also like a long-term maintenance and installation cost, right? We're talking about a broader cross-section, more concrete. That's also more concrete to plow or to repair in the future. So I think I don't see. I think I would caution against overbuilding, however we want to define that, right? But I don't think we should build more than we really need to, because there are ongoing downstream costs to that.
We like to have some fun here sometimes.
Just
Great points, Mr. Budke. Mr. Mattson?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of things you said, especially about the speed going down Belmont. The other one that I would say, like in your study here, you're going all the way up to 47th with the interchange coming in here, the speeds coming off the interstate, Euland Park, South Middle School, everything right there. I think it's another one of those school areas, and now we're going to put that, it's going to probably be the closest one we have to an interchange coming off the interstate. So if that's part of the study area, I'd be really curious how we're going to address that and not have a huge bottleneck coming off the interstate.
Very good. A lot of questions. You see, no, you didn't think we'd say a word, Mr. Brooks. There you go.
I was hopeful that you would.
You'd never know, yeah.
You know.
I think to answer the interchange, that's still to come, right, on some of those designs, but I know engineering's looking at how to capture that and to hopefully divert a lot of that by Columbia Road.
I do like the thought process of not putting the cart before the horse, kind of what we're all saying. Open it up. If we're going to pay for a study, let's be honest here. Let's just not do this, because then we've thrown that money away and do this again. You got a whole corridor, you got a whole deal, lay it out. Okay, that it?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're on to 5.2 housing topics.
Okay, let me. All right, so housing, general title for a general presentation.
That's pretty general, Ms. Johnson.
So yeah, this presentation will cover
Things that make you say,
housing needs, but also the specific topics that we talked about at the end of the meeting last month. So just a general disclaimer, this is meant to be an overview to spark interest and discussion rather than being all-encompassing and just high-level overview. So starting with the housing needs and issues in Grand Forks, the data I'm about to share with you was collected by a consulting firm out of Denver called Root Policy Research. The city has hired them on to draft our community development block grant consolidated plan. Just a little bit of background, the consolidated plan is required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's a strategic 5-year plan that guides the goals and use of our CDBG grant funding. So one of the things the consolidated plan looks at is housing needs in the community. So what Root found was that between 2010 and 2022, median home values increased by 64%, and in that same time frame, median rents increased by 49%, all while median household incomes increased only by 46%. So as you can see, housing costs definitely outpaced median household income increases, especially for home ownership and home values. To the right is renter cost burden by income. Renter cost burden is when a household spends 30% or more of their monthly income on rent. So here you can see from that time period, 2010 to 2022, at least, well, almost all of the income ranges have experienced more cost burden than before, especially this middle range income here, up to 62% in 2022. So also speaking on cost burden for renters, we wanted to compare our cost burden to other peer cities. So we looked at Fargo, Bismarck, Rapid City, and Sioux Falls. For the lowest income range here, we're kind of all very similar. When you get to the 20,000 up to almost 50,000 range, we do have more rent burden compared to other cities. Like Fargo, for example, is 10% less than us. Down here, we are kind of more in range with other cities, and down here it's pretty similar across. So here is what we call affordability gaps. This is for the rental market. So here you can see the number of renters in each income range, and then the number of affordable rental units for renters in this income range. All the way on the right is the number that is available to the amount of affordable rental units that would be available to the renters in that income category. So as you can see, pretty big shortages up here, and then down here again in the income range of $75,000 or more. And then again, that was compared to peer cities. So we're kind of middle of the road here. Fargo and Sioux Falls do have a worse affordability gap in the rental market, but we are more worse off than Bismarck and Rapid City. Again, same concept with the table, but this is for home ownership. So as you can see over here, again, there's some pretty significant affordability gaps for home ownership opportunities. Essentially, you don't really have much opportunity for affordable housing opportunities until you start making in that $50,000 to $74,999 income range. And then again, we looked at other cities, and besides Fargo, we do have the largest affordability gap in the home ownership market. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Andrea, and she's going to go over some of the more specific topics that we talked about last month.
I just want to jump in here real quick while Andrea's getting set up. What you just saw was presented to, so those are some of the slides presented on Monday night to City Council. We thought it'd be important to show you as well. And this is part of that, as we've merged planning and community development together, this is some of the things that we just think make sense to present to you guys as well. So, and the next topic of housing, again, it's one of the benefits of this merged department and having all these things come together.
There's also a benefit in having some other funding source for collecting data. So that side of the office paid for that data collection, which is selfishly nice on my part. So thanks, Colin. So the previous topics the commission asked to learn more about would be coming out of the planning conference was the missing middle, the lot test, the ADUs, and the cost impacts of building code. And so jumping into that missing middle, what it would be is multiple small units in one structure, focusing more on the scale of that structure in the neighborhood. And so the thought process is you would take the same footprint as a standard single-family home in the neighborhood and more common like single-family conversions, taking like that. So you don't necessarily notice a large apartment complex in the neighborhood, more you see the single-family to the outside. But allowing those additional units in the property at that same house scale in the neighborhood allows for affordability, achieve closer affordable prices in a desirable neighborhood. But one of the big takeaways from missing middle is that it really only works in walkable neighborhoods and functional walkability, not recreational walkability, because it promotes a reduction in parking requirements. So that only works, right, if you have access to potentially walking to work, potentially walking to school, getting to transit within a reasonable amount of distance, grocery stores, retail, things like that. So it truly is only functional in a core neighborhood along active routes. So it would not be applicable to our Shady Ridge area, to other things. It's just too large of a distance to any type of transit, any type of service. So we would be talking missing middle. And so here's are some examples that we found of existing missing middle in town. These would be in the near South Side neighborhood. I'm more familiar with that neighborhood, so I was able to pick them out. The fourplex on Belmont, the duplex on Reeves, and then the eightplex on Chestnut would all be examples of Grand Forks' version of missing middle, all of which were built prior to our existing zoning codes being in place and regulating parking and setbacks and things like that. So AARP North Dakota would be a huge resource for us to tap into. We've had a preliminary conversation with them because they do advocate for missing middle in terms of the aging in place options, ADUs, things like that. North Dakota has a aging population demographic trajectory, and so to try to get ahead of that and start building more senior ready or aging in place things at an affordable rate, they're definitely leading the charge on the advocacy thing. And so I think there's a handout of this publication on each of your chairs. If there's interest, I'd suggest looking through it. I'll just scroll through, if it will open, a couple of different things because they really put together some great examples of what missing middle is and what it could be. And again, it focuses on that house scale that fit physically and aesthetically within an existing neighborhood. But they would have... This has a great diagram of what those might look like. We don't really have cottage court outside of our townhouse situation, but the sixplex here reminds me of that one on University and 20th, 23rd, something like that, in that ballpark. So Harriman Building, I would have never remembered that, but everybody knows the building on University. And so kind of where that missing middle might fit in terms of the scale between single family to large scale apartment complexes. Goes through the benefits, again, affordability, reduced transportation because of parking costs, reasons why, as a theme across many cities trying to respond to the housing crisis across the nation. Many are giving reasons as to why they are seeking missing middle and trying to find ways to open up zoning codes to allow them and figure that out. Distribution of costs, use of existing infrastructure, equity, income empowerment on that affordability level. And so this document just goes through some great things that if there was interest to explore missing middle further, we'd go into that a little bit farther. It gets into density, to zoning, to parking reductions. There's a great example of a development in terms of, this kind of shows how you could potentially scatter it through a neighborhood rather than condensing it and having a bigger impact, maybe pushing those larger buildings to the end of a block. If you think of the apartment, I can't remember if it's Belmont Homes or something like 4th and Belmont Avenue, right? There's that brick Belmont apartment complex that's situated on a corner block on a somewhat busy neighborhood street. It fits, it works. It's a good transition on that corner. But what I was going to show real quick, if I can get there. this one. Just kind of highlighting the difference, the pros and cons, and the different scenarios you can do, whether you prioritize green space, you prioritize parking. There's some different ways to set up a development and try to meet some of that higher affordable goals. So with that, I will jump back to the presentation. Whoops. So we took an evaluation of where missing middle would be allowed by right in Grand Forks. And so the conclusion we came to is 72% of residentially zoned, ballpark number, is zoned for single family detached only. So one unit separated, nothing attached. And then the R2 taking up a large section of the rest of that being a 2-unit maximum. So our R3 and our R4s, they're really the only neighborhoods that really exist today in a neighborhood scale of R3 and R4 is the near north neighborhood and the near south side neighborhood. Near south side being north of 4th Avenue South, the traditional historic near south side district, it would be south of 4th Avenue and is in R2. That's where your kind of Reeves Drive and things are. But if you think about the near south side and the near north, that would be the missing middle that kind of existed prior to zoning codes and things like that. So there really isn't anywhere by right today we could pursue something like that. So then we can get into the lot test, and I'll just quickly run through. AARP, again, a good resource for the state, partnered with the Department of Commerce for this Milner example. Milner being southeast North Dakota area. And so the goal was to try to develop different solutions that would allow for changing lifestyles, extended families, separated, non-related tenants, as well as adult children and seniors wanting to age in place. And so this kind of steps through, they had a 21,000 square foot lot, and they were wondering how they could add density at a neighborhood level. And so they get the primary unit in front, a completely separate studio wing, and if there was interest in ADU above the garage, though not all of them have an ADU above the garage in order to meet parking counts. And so combined, you're looking at 9 lots on a 150-foot frontage. So a good example of what can be done. But again, getting into the walkability distance for what I assume is Milner's downtown. I'll admit I've never been there. This one was kind of the key takeaway for me, in that it's the traditional 50 by 140 lot, which is what we typically see in our more, I guess what I would call our walkable neighborhoods, and what could potentially fit. So really that 5-plex can't really fit on a 50 by 140, but a main unit, a studio, ADU or not, could certainly fit on 150, and it kind of shows how those different accesses to the units would interact with the street and the sidewalk. And again, just that concept of that incremental allowance of, someone buys the home to begin with, they want to move mother-in-law in, do the studio wing, and then potentially maybe do an ADU. And so it's that allowance of an incremental increase to the lot to achieve some different housing opportunities and housing choice. So then we got into our lot tests on the Grand Forks level in terms of what our existing R1, R2, R3, and R4 zoning codes would permit. And so this would be the R1 test. This is a single-family owner-occupied property that's a 3,000 square foot lot, 50 by 60. And so owner occupied today, persons gaining equity and all those things that come with property ownership. But the minimum lot size isn't being met, or isn't met with this one. The R1 district has a minimum lot size of 7,500 square feet, which would be about a 53 or a 54. Ryan will tell me my math's bad, but it's larger than your standard 50 by 140, even as far as a minimum lot size for our R1 requirements to date. We have varied that in recent PUDs and in other areas, but if we look at a true review of what our R1 says, we're supposed to be falling to that 7,500. We do have a non-conforming section of code that says any lots in existence prior to 2006 are considered buildable at 300 or 3,500 square feet. So this lot, being smaller than that, would say it's a non-buildable lot. It came an issue back in 2021 because the homeowner was trying to sell it, refinance it, whatever, right? And the banks want to ensure that if they're putting a mortgage on a property, they can insure it. you can't insure it a non-buildable lot. And so went through the variance process to essentially say, yes, it doesn't meet our lot sizes, but we recognize it. It's got an existing structure that works, it functions. We would like, if it were to burn down, because that's the common appraisal and insurance question, would we allow it to be rebuilt at its existing footprint? And the answer was yes. So it's gotten a variance, but it highlights some flaws in our code. And if you were to build something new, if you were okay with the 3,000 square foot lot size, the situation of the house and the structure, as well as the garage, would not be permissible, but just due to setbacks. It doesn't have a big enough rear yard. It doesn't have a side yard because of it's not really a corner lot because it's an alley. It's not really a, but so the front yard setback, the rear yard, and then the accessory building setback from the alley isn't being met. So this footprint could not be built based on our current zoning code.
Andrea, can I interject there real quick?
No.
That minimum lot size, really about financing a lot. Like if it burned down, right, with the realtors, if it burned down, the federal government needs to be able to check a box that says it can be rebuilt. I don't think it probably ever would, right? We've got a few of those where actually some fires that have happened, but it's really about checking that box that helps the financing. So that might be a future code piece that we need to have a discussion on. That I don't think, we always want to allow those lots to still stay in our housing stock. So I think it might be something that we want to look at in the future, so.
Jumping into the R2 district, we looked at, could you do a duplex? Because again, that R2 is either the single family attached, so they share a common wall, 1 unit per lot is typically the configuration we see. But if there's a joint wall, it has to be in an R2 district or 2 units on a lot. And so looking at this one, you could do 2 one-bedroom units. You could not do 2 two-bedroom units because 2 bedrooms would require too much parking and you'd be over. If we're looking at a true evaluation of code, even though staff has already bent the rules here. So our current off-street parking code says you should not count as required parking or meeting required parking the garage stall plus the driveway stall because they're stacked. You can't get to the garage stall if somebody's parked in the driveway. However, as a policy decision, we've said if it's only affecting the same unit, so if you, your spouse or whatever are double parked and really only causing an issue for yourselves, you figure that out amongst the unit, we'll count both to the required parking. If the garage is allocated to a separate unit than the driveway stall, no go, don't pass go, can't do it, right? Because then 2 units would have to interact about parking and that's just not logical. The logical piece, you figure out your parking if somebody parks in front of the other person, is kind of how we've abided by it. But looking at code, it would be something we would look to fix if we ever did an update. So you could do a 1 bedroom. The R3, kind of the same configuration, but here we're getting to the 50 by 140. You could do 3 one bedroom units, excuse me, in order to meet the parking and the impervious. Though again, you have to do that variance for the stack parking for a true review. Again, you can't do 2 bedrooms because that would put you over on your parking counts. Same with the R4. This really should be a 3 one-bedroom unit because we couldn't do 4 for parking. And so you could do 3 one-bedroom units and meet all the standards between parking setbacks, front yard setbacks, accessory setbacks, those types of things. You can meet it, but once you get to the 4-bedroom, and the reason a 4-bedroom doesn't work is because you couldn't, due to setback requirements, you wouldn't be able to add an additional garage and driveway. You would need a variance. So by right, you could only do a 3 one-bedroom. So upon the review of those lot tests, really, you can only do 1-bedroom units. We've had some different requests for 2 bedrooms and we can't, just configuratively can't make it work. Couple have gone to the variance board to try to see if they could get something passed. Believe the one I know of has failed due to neighborhood feedback. And so the biggest hurdles here would be the parking requirements, limiting those number of bedrooms because our parking falls to number of bedrooms, not number of units. And then the other barrier, so parking being the main barrier, parking requirements being the main barrier, and then where folks could do this by right. They're really, if you change the zoning code, you could change the zoning code all day and all night, but if you don't have a zoning district for somebody to build in, there's nowhere to actually build it. So those would be the biggest hurdles we identified with the lot tests. AARP goes even a step further and does a land development code audit. Mandan recently did one. And so there's some different opportunities we could continue to pursue if there's interest. Do you want me to keep going to ADUs? Do you want to talk about missing middle?
Keep going.
Okay. So then the ADU, which falls right in line with the missing middle in terms of that incremental or different housing choice, would be that small residence. This one being more so focused in the single-family detached districts to allow something smaller, accessory, to coincide with that main housing structure. The theory there being that the R2, if you have a single family in an R2 district, you can already by right add 2 units if you had an interest. You just couldn't take a duplex and make it a triplex in an R2 district. And so really that ADU conversation kind of revolves around that 72% of residential being zoned strictly for only single family detached. ARP here does a great job of kind of conveying thoughts they've taken on a numerous amount of surveys in terms of why folks are interested in pursuing ADUs. And again, that more of assistance, that more generational living and things like that. Last time we talked about ADUs, it was in response to a duplex requesting to go to a triplex essentially on the lot. And so the feedback there was not interested in adding that extra density and directed staff to look at new development. So if that conversation's changed, certainly welcome that and would, along with that missing middle conversation, look to how we can do that. But the major barrier with an ADU probably is parking requirements again, and things like that. I would say we have had a request for an ADU. It was a scenario where the house was, the main house was on one side of the lot, the garage on the other, and they wanted to add an independent unit behind the garage that you would access through the garage, but it would be completely independent of the main structure outside that garage connection. But we would say that's independent because the garage is accessory. The feedback back to this property owner was that, nope, that's an ADU. Little interest, because this was shortly a month after we had that ADU discussion. Like, no interest in pursuing that. So he was, and the reason being it was for a mother-in-law that was going through some medical care and they wanted to be on the property. And so what he had to do then instead was to, he had to attach it to his house and then the access to the kitchen. And so there really is no logical way to separate that unit off in the future. But if the feedback I'd give there and the point I make there is that we do have an interest in that housing type and trying to respond to that generational request and things like that. And so it's not necessarily staff just saying, hey, we went to a conference and this is a great idea. It's responding to some requests that we have gotten. And then the final thing was the building code cost implications. I really struggled. You guys asked what's the true difference between the residential code and the building code. Really struggled to come up with hard numbers for you guys because it's more of a legislative and policy decision at this point. And the general pushback between safety concerns and if we've overregulated maybe safety concerns for those. I've heard 4 to 6 units. Going from the building code, the commercial building code to the residential code, with the desire being that your single-family attached builders operate in the residential code, and there's a lot of capacity for those contractors. They could do 3 or 4 plexes if they could follow the residential code. They know it, they can build to it, but it's much harder for them to learn the commercial building code to get to a 3 or 4 plex, as well as the energy efficiency things that come with the building code, sprinklers, things like that. And so, but there's a question of, does that matter? Are those safety features worth the cost implications versus reducing down to the residential code and things like that? And so it's more of a legislative kind of policy decision going on about this right now, as far as what I could find for research for you guys. AARP is kind of giving us some indication that maybe the state of North Dakota will be putting something out on this for the upcoming legislation. Apparently, some of those things are potentially coming out next week, though we all know kind of deadlines get pushed away. But we're hoping to get a better purview of what the state might be looking at for housing recommendations for legislation here in the coming month or so. So as far as next steps go. It would be more to keep you updated of what that legislation looks like, because we could certainly play a much stronger supportive role in advocating for those different things, and then maybe being a leader in that effort. So, and that's also staff capacity, selfish reasons there too, but.
Very well done.
So.
Very well done. I just go back to like we talked before, the fourplexes were a big thing back when I started in electrical, wiring those, and then they went to the huge commercial codes, and people stopped doing them. And I really think that's sad, because you had separate entrances and you had separate, if you look behind Valley Dairy, on 36th, that's where they put a bunch of them off of Washington there, in 36, kind of in that little area. I remember doing those years ago, and they were really a neat concept, but now with sprinkler systems and all that, you just can't build them.
I have a number of comments. The first one is, I would really caution you in the beginning of your presentation talking about Fargo and Sioux Falls, as to, what the missing middle is and what where we have gaps, because those towns are significantly different. Fargo is 264,000 people, we're about 100. Now, looking at it for ideas, I think is great, but looking at it for statistics of what we're missing and what we're not missing, it's really comparing apples and oranges. And then when you go to Sioux Falls, it's even more so.
Sure.
So I would just caution you towards that. I love this discussion. Thank you very much. You did a wonderful job. This is very interesting to me, and I know it's very interesting to the state. In talking to our future governor, I know one of the things that he is going to be pushing and looking at is, how do we deal with an aging population? And the studies out there that if we can keep somebody in their home for another year, I mean, it saves us an incredible amount of money, and from the state's perspective. And I think there are going to be a lot of incentives to do that, to keep, and part of keeping them in their home is putting them in a home with another family member. The ADUs, the duplexes, that kind of thing is really going to be a tool that I know that there is going to be a lot of interest in, and I just applaud you for being on top of that, and encourage you to keep looking at that, because I really think we're going to see some neat stuff and have some neat ideas that we can use for that. And then also great, you had very little time, great first look at the code, but I'd really like to see that, you continue on that route for how do we make it easier code-wise to build 4, 6 plexes, or even accessory buildings if that becomes, something that we show some interest in. But just a great job. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I was just waiting. I was just going to call on you. Mr. Budke, please.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that sentiment. I think this is outstanding work. I think it's, I've forgotten how long I've been on this commission, but I feel like this is the best single, investigation that I've seen in that time. I'm frankly not surprised that in your test fit scenarios, you're finding that the parking requirements are a big hindrance in those test fits. I think in my mind anyway, it's been clear for some time that the way that we approach minimum lot sizes, the minimum parking requirements based on bedrooms, all of these things, all of this whole suite of call them regulations, we have created the housing crisis that we experience today. And it's not just Grand Forks. Some places feel it more or less acutely, but I mean, I feel like in the last few years, this really broke out as a national issue. It started in California, but it's everywhere now. Everybody is feeling the pinch, and everybody is looking for solutions. And I feel like, frankly, a lot of them exist in our history. We didn't used to build the way that we do now, and they did not have the same sorts of housing affordability issues, not across the board like we have nationwide today. So maybe just one other comment. Well, first, I absolutely agree that we should continue to push on this door, really. And then also, I was very appreciative to hear the recognition of functional walkability when we're talking about these places. I don't know. Well, I'll just leave it at, I think that's a really important point to recognize, that we have core neighborhoods that were developed when in a certain paradigm, and then we basically regulated them out of existence. And now we are reaping that. And it's a lot of really pretty poor outcomes. So let's keep going.
Thank you. Anyone else? That's it.
And I would just say that I can't take all the credit for the presentation. Haley and Sierra did a bulk of the heavy lifting on that stuff, so.
We knew that
I just
going
had
in.
to talk it. So,
obvious. Yeah.
we'll certainly do that.
No, I already said great job.
With that feedback, thank you for that positive feedback there. It's not an easy solution, and it's not the only solution, because even though we should go after missing middle for that affordability, we still have a market for the existing single family that we're building. And so it's not a one or the other. I want to make that very clear. It's more of a just spreading the different types across the board. Because it's just more of creating different housing choice versus one or the other. So with that, we will follow up with AARP North Dakota, because they are our biggest partner and possibility for success in some of these efforts. They're a little busy the next few months just gearing up for legislation, so I'm not quite sure what that timeline looks like. But we'll have a follow-up with them to see what we can do in terms of continuing the conversation, what kind of project timeline we can line up with them. So we'll keep going on that, and then again, we'll keep you updated of any legislation, because if the state leads the charge, it's much easier to kind of follow in and follow suit, so.
Thank you very much. All right, we have got meeting schedule.
Yes, so we are asking for approval there of the 2025 meeting schedule. You previously approved the move back from January 8th for the New Year's holiday. That again, speak now if the July 2nd is going to be an issue.
Yep, get rid of that one.
Okay, we'll push that back to July 9th.
Yep.
And then January 7th and 26th, we're going to throw this on there because we know we'll have to push that back as well. So looking for approval with that July 9th change.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Mr. Mattson, moved by Mr. Reichert. Any further discussion? Seeing no hands, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Approved with amendment of July 2nd to the 9th. Okay, really quick monthly update.
Yes. So for November update, we had approved a core scientific temporary building, and under review right now, we have an airport traffic control tower and base building. For meetings, we had a downtown design review board meeting on October 10th, where the board approved a sign appeal for a 33 square foot projecting sign at the Artisan. That's what I got.
Thank you.
The final update being we need to do an election of officers in December to abide by our bylaws. We were a little late last year, so we'll attempt to be on time this year. So just a notice that we'll have an election next month if you want to think about nominations or whatnot, so.
What's that?
Don't miss the meeting.
That's right. That's right. All right, with that, so moved. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
So do you remember?